The dark side of Kabbalah, black magic, golems, and the Western occult secret. Inner light, esoteric wisdom for the soul's ascent is a contemplative space devoted to unveiling the hidden teachings that have guided mystics, seekers, and sages across the ages. Within this sanctuary of speculation and spiritual yearning, the traditions of Kabbalah have long occupied a revered place, offering a map to the unseen, a lexicon for the ineffable, and a hope for transcendence. For those drawn to the mysteries of existence, Kabbalah promises access to the inner workings of creation and the divine spark within every soul. Yet, as every true seeker soon discovers, the path of illumination is rarely free from shadow. The radiant wisdom of Kabbalah, with its meditations on the Sephirot, its visions of cosmic unity, and its assurance of the soul's ascent, is mirrored by a darker tradition, one that has both enticed and alarmed generations. This is the secret current of practical Kabbalah, whispered about in candlelit rooms and inscribed in cryptic manuscripts, where the pursuit of spiritual mastery becomes entangled with the arts of power, protection, and peril. The history of Kabbalah is not merely a chronicle of contemplative ascent but also a tale of those who sought to wield the hidden energies of creation itself. Alongside its teachings of unity and light, there are stories of sacred names spoken in forbidden tones, of amulets and incantations crafted to bind angels or command spirits, and of the Golem, an enigmatic being birthed from clay and word, protector and potential destroyer alike. In this exploration, we venture into the shadowed corridors of Kabbalah's legacy, examining the practices that have been variously condemned as black magic or revered as divine science. We trace the legends of the Golem from the banks of the Vltava in Prague to the pages of the Talmud and beyond, seeking to understand not only the mechanics of mystical creation but the ethical and existential warnings embedded within these tales. Just as the Zohar, Kabbalah's most luminous text, teaches that every ascent toward light is shadowed by the other side, so too must every honest inquiry into esoteric wisdom acknowledge the dangers that attend the quest for hidden knowledge. The Sitra Achra, the realm of husks and shells, of chaos and inversion, lurks as a caution against pride and presumption. For the Kabbalists, the boundaries between sacred and profane, miracle and magic, are ever porous, demanding humility, discipline, and discernment from all who approach. Yet the story does not end within the confines of Jewish mysticism. These secret arts, once zealously guarded, found their way into the hands of outsiders, Renaissance magi, Christian Kabbalists, and the architects of Western occult societies. As Kabbalistic diagrams and divine names crossed cultural boundaries, they were reinterpreted, appropriated, and sometimes distorted, seeding new currents of esoteric practice, from the enigmatic rites of the Knights Templar and the speculative rituals of Freemasonry to the daring experiments of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and the notorious Aleister Crowley. To understand Kabbalah's dark side is not merely to catalogue forbidden rituals or supernatural legends. It is to grasp the perennial human tension between the longing for transcendence and the temptation of power. It is to witness the struggle between humility and hubris, devotion and domination, faith and fear. As we begin this journey, let us remember, the light that guides the soul upward always casts a shadow. The true initiate knows that wisdom lies not in denial of the darkness, but in the courage to confront it, to learn its lessons, and to walk the narrow path where the sacred and the perilous are often intertwined. The roots of Kabbalah, from mystical vision to magical practice. Kabbalah is a word that conjures images of ancient manuscripts, cryptic diagrams, and the flicker of candlelight in darkened rooms. Its roots stretch back to the very origins of Judaism, emerging from a culture steeped in prophecy, ritual, and a ceaseless yearning for the divine. While much of Jewish tradition is concerned with the laws and stories of the Torah, there has always existed an undercurrent of esoteric speculation, a belief that hidden beneath the surface of scripture are secrets known only to the initiated. The classical Kabbalah that flourished in medieval Europe did not arise in a vacuum. It was preceded by centuries of mystical rumination, stretching back to the apocalyptic visions of Ezekiel and the ecstatic journeys described in the Hekkelot and Merkava literature. These early texts, written between the 2nd and 7th centuries CE, recount journeys through celestial palaces, encounters with angelic guardians, and glimpses of the divine chariot. For the mystics who authored these works, the universe was layered and alive, filled with secret stairways and cosmic correspondences. As the centuries passed, these traditions merged with philosophical speculation and the influence of surrounding cultures. The rise of Neoplatonism, Gnosticism, and even Islamic Sufism contributed to a new vision of the cosmos, one in which the individual soul could ascend through spiritual worlds, drawing nearer to the ineffable source of all being. In this evolving landscape, the seeds of Kabbalah began to take root. By the 12th and 13th centuries, the Kabbalists of Provence and Spain gave formal shape to these mystical intuitions. They developed a system of 10 Sephirot, emanations or attributes through which God interacts with creation. The Sephirot form a tree, a cosmic diagram mapping the descent of divine energy into the material world and the corresponding path of the soul's return. The Kabbalist, through contemplation and ethical refinement, sought to ascend this tree, repairing the broken vessels of creation and restoring harmony to the cosmos. Yet, even in its most contemplative forms, Kabbalah was never free from the allure of power. The very premise of a universe structured by language, where the right word or name could unlock the gates of heaven, laid the foundation for a tradition of magic. The Sefer Yetzirah, one of the earliest mystical texts, teaches that the Hebrew alphabet is not merely a human invention but a set of creative tools. God himself, according to the Sefer Yetzirah, used the letters to speak the world into being. If so, might not the adept, by learning the proper combinations, become a co-creator alongside the divine? This question animated the rise of practical Kabbalah. Alongside the visionaries and philosophers, there emerged a class of Jewish magicians, men who crafted amulets, performed exorcisms, and invoked the sacred names of God in pursuit of tangible results. The boundaries between faith and sorcery, miracle and magic, became increasingly porous. Some rabbis, such as the authors of the Sefer HaRazim and Sefer Raziel HaMalik, collected and transmitted magical knowledge with apparent reverence. Others, wary of the dangers, condemned these practices as heretical, warning that the quest for power could lead to ruin. The tension between ascent and manipulation, humility and hubris, would shape the development of Kabbalah for centuries to come. The tradition's greatest texts, most notably the Zohar, are filled with warnings about the dangers of forbidden knowledge. Yet, the allure was too great for many to resist. In the shadowed corridors of Jewish history, stories abound of sages who, through prayer and ritual, commanded angels, bound demons, and even created life itself. In this sense, the roots of Kabbalah are inseparable from the shadow they cast. The quest for union with the divine is always attended by the temptation of power. To walk the path of Kabbalah is to journey between worlds, between light and darkness, wisdom and madness, blessing and curse. The Shem HaMephorash and the power of the sacred name. In the world of Kabbalah, language is not merely a vessel for human thought, but the very fabric from which reality is woven. The Hebrew letters, according to mystical tradition, are primordial shapes, each imbued with creative power. By uttering the proper words, reciting the right combinations, or inscribing divine names with precision, a practitioner may touch the foundation of existence itself. Nowhere is this principle more evident than in the doctrine of the Shem HaMephorash, the explicit name of God. The Shem HaMephorash is a sequence of 72 names, each composed of 3 Hebrew letters, derived through a complex process from 3 consecutive verses in the book of Exodus, Exodus chapter 14 verses 19 to 21. These verses, describing the parting of the Red Sea, are arranged in a peculiar fashion. The first verse is written forwards, the second backwards, and the third forwards again. By taking one letter from each verse in sequence, the ancient Kabbalists generated 72 unique triplets, each believed to correspond to an angelic entity or a specific aspect of divine power. For the Kabbalist, these names were not mere abstractions. Each was a key, a formula for accessing spiritual realms or influencing the material world. Amulets inscribed with one or more of the 72 names were carried for protection, healing, or good fortune. Rituals invoking these names were meticulously prescribed, requiring the practitioner to prepare through fasting, purification, and prayer. The success of such rituals depended not only on external actions but also on the purity of intention and the alignment of the practitioner's soul with the divine will. The magical use of the Shem HaMephorash was not without its dangers. The Talmud and later rabbinic literature are replete with warnings about the misuse of divine names. An error in pronunciation, a lapse in concentration, or an impure motive could turn a blessing into a curse. The boundaries between miracle and magic, sanctity and blasphemy, were perilously thin. Some rabbis taught that only the most righteous, those who had mastered both the written and oral Torah, should even contemplate the use of such names. The power of language in Kabbalistic magic extended beyond the Shem HaMephorash. The 42-letter name and the 72-letter name are referenced in the Talmud and later mystical texts, each carrying its own set of associations and ritual uses. The very act of meditating on the letters themselves, permuting them in accordance with esoteric formulae, was believed to open the practitioner to visions, mystical ascent, or the power to command spiritual beings. Gematria, the mystical art of numerology, deepened the Kabbalists' relationship with language. By assigning numerical values to each Hebrew letter, practitioners could discover hidden connections between words, verses, and concepts. For example, the word chai, life, has the numerical value of 18, making it a symbol of good fortune and a frequent feature in Jewish amulets and blessings. Through Gematria, the Torah became an infinite web of secret meanings, each waiting to be unlocked by the diligent and spiritually attuned. The magical and mystical use of language in Kabbalah finds its ultimate expression in the act of creation itself. The Sefer Yetzirah teaches that God created the world through the manipulation of the 22 Hebrew letters, combining and permuting them to bring forth the elements, planets, and creatures. The Kabbalist, by learning to imitate this divine process, becomes a co-creator, participating in the ongoing renewal of existence. Yet, as with all such power, the risks are commensurate with the rewards. The history of Kabbalah is filled with stories of men who, through pride or impatience, mishandled the sacred names and brought disaster upon themselves or their communities. The rabbinic authorities, wary of the dangers, often forbade the teaching of practical Kabbalah to all but the most advanced and trustworthy students. Even then, failure was always a possibility. One famous tale involves the sage Elisha ben Abuya, a Talmudic scholar who, after delving too deeply into esoteric wisdom, became a heretic known as Achra, the other. His story is a cautionary parable about the perils of seeking power without adequate preparation or humility. Despite the dangers, the allure of the Shem HaMephorash and the other sacred names has never faded. From medieval Spain to Saft, from the ghettos of Eastern Europe to the mystical orders of the West, generations of seekers have risked much to touch the hidden roots of language and power. The magical tradition of Kabbalah is thus both a testament to the creative potential of the human spirit and a warning about the temptation to overreach. As we turn to the legends of the Golem, we see this tension writ large. The same sacred letters that can heal or protect may also animate monsters, and the boundary between wisdom and hubris is, as ever, perilously thin. The Golem, creation, hubris, and the shadow of power. Few legends capture the ambiguous promise and peril of practical Kabbalah as vividly as the tale of the Golem. The Golem, a being fashioned from clay or mud and animated by mystical means, stands at the crossroads of faith and magic, hope and dread, creation and catastrophe. Its story is not only a cornerstone of Jewish folklore but an enduring symbol in the wider imagination, a testament to humanity's perennial longing to imitate the creative act of God, and the ever-present risk that such longing can turn to hubris. The roots of the Golem legend are ancient, reaching back to the Talmud and even earlier. The Talmud, Sanhedrin 65b, relates that the sage Rava created a man using the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Creation, a cryptic treatise describing how the Hebrew letters can be combined to bring forth life. This being, however, could not speak, a sign that, though animated, it was not truly human. When another sage, Rabbi Zira, realized the nature of this creation, he commanded it to return to dust. This story is more than a curiosity. It encapsulates a central lesson of Kabbalistic magic, the boundary between imitation and blasphemy, between sacred creation and forbidden sorcery, is never entirely clear. Over the centuries, the tale of the Golem evolved, gathering new details and taking on fresh significance in the face of changing historical circumstances. By the early modern period, the most famous version had coalesced in Prague, centered on the figure of Rabbi Judah Loew, the Maharal. According to legend, the Jews of Prague were threatened by blood libel, false accusations that they used Christian blood in their rituals, along with periodic outbreaks of violence and persecution. To protect his community, Rabbi Loew resolved to create a golem. The process, as described in later retellings, is a masterpiece of mystical drama. The rabbi, accompanied by his most trusted disciples, rises before dawn and makes his way to the banks of the Vltava River. There, in silence and secrecy, they mold a giant figure out of river clay. Through the recitation of sacred names, the permutation of Hebrew letters, and the careful observance of ritual, they animate the golem. The word emet, truth, is inscribed on the creature's forehead, or alternatively, a parchment bearing the tetragrammaton, the four-letter name of God, is placed in its mouth. The golem proves a powerful guardian, patrolling the ghetto, performing heavy labor, and, according to some stories, foiling the plots of those who would harm the Jews. Yet, as with all such tales, the blessing becomes a curse. The golem grows ever more powerful, increasingly unable or unwilling to distinguish friend from foe. In some versions, it runs amok on the Sabbath, a day when work is forbidden, causing destruction and terror. Realizing the danger, Rabbi Loew erases the first letter of emet, leaving met, death, and the golem collapses into lifeless clay. The legend of the golem is rich in symbolism. On one level, it is an allegory of the Jewish condition in exile, vulnerable, resourceful, and always at risk from hostile powers. The golem is a protector, a miraculous intervention in a world of danger and injustice. On another level, it is a meditation on the limits of human power. The rabbi, though wise and pious, is not God. His creation is always flawed, lacking the divine spark that animates true humanity. The golem, mute and obedient, is at once a marvel and a monster, a shadow of its creator's ambition and a warning of the dangers of pride. This duality is inherent in the very act of creation as understood by Kabbalah. The Sefer Yetzirah teaches that the world was made through the permutation and combination of the Hebrew letters. To master these letters is to participate in the ongoing work of creation, to become, in a sense, a partner with God. Yet the tradition is equally clear that such power is not to be wielded lightly. The act of speaking the sacred names, of inscribing them on clay or parchment, is fraught with risk. The boundary between miracle and magic, between the holy and the profane, is easily crossed. The golem also serves as a metaphor for the dangers of unchecked power, both individual and communal. In the hands of the righteous, the magical arts of Kabbalah may serve to heal, protect, and uplift. In the hands of the proud, the impatient, or the unscrupulous, they may unleash forces that cannot be controlled. The golem's rampage is a parable for all human creations, technological, political, or spiritual, that outgrow their maker's intentions. In the centuries since its first appearance, the golem has become a fixture of Jewish and Western culture. Writers, artists, and philosophers have found in its story a fertile ground for exploring questions of creation, responsibility, and the shadow side of human aspiration. From Gustav Meyrink's early 20th century novel, Der Golem, to the figure of Frankenstein's monster, the motif of the artificial being, brought to life by forbidden knowledge and ultimately turning against its creator, has become a modern myth. Within Kabbalistic tradition itself, the golem remains both a warning and an inspiration. The power to create is inseparable from the duty to use that power wisely. The silent figure of clay, animated by the sacred name and returned to dust by its erasure, stands as a perpetual reminder that the true work of the mystic is not domination but humility, not conquest but service. As we move onward into the darker realms of Kabbalah, we find that the story of the golem is but a prelude to the greater dangers that lurk in the shadow, the Sitra, Achra and the Qliphoth, the other side, where the boundaries between sacred and profane dissolve, and the soul confronts the ultimate mystery of darkness and light. The Sitra, Achra and the Qliphoth, the other side of creation. If the golem represents the ambiguous power of creation, the Sitra, Achra and the Qliphoth manifest the ever-present dangers of descent into chaos, impurity, and spiritual peril. In the intricate cosmology of the Kabbalah, the universe is not a simple dichotomy of good and evil, light and darkness. Rather, it is a complex, dynamic interplay where the sacred and the profane are intertwined, and where the pursuit of hidden knowledge can easily lead the seeker astray. The term Sitra Achra, Aramaic for the other side, is used in the Zohar and later Kabbalistic literature to describe the realm of the impure, the forces of chaos and evil that exist in opposition to the holy. The Sitra Achra is not merely a location or a set of malevolent beings. It is a principle, a spiritual reality that mirrors and distorts the divine order. Just as the Sephirot channel the divine light into creation, so too does the Sitra Achra channel the residue, the refuse, the broken sparks that fell during the primordial catastrophe known as the shattering of the vessels, Shevirat HaKelim. Out of this cosmic event, according to the Lurianic Kabbalah of 16th century Saft, arose the Qliphoth, the husks, or shells, that encase and obscure the divine light. These Qliphoth are not inert. They are the source of all impurity and evil in the world, the abode of demons, destructive forces, and the root of suffering. Every act of sin, every lapse in spiritual vigilance, is said to nourish the Qliphoth, strengthening the Sitra Achra and perpetuating the exile of the divine presence, the Shekinah, from the world. For the Kabbalist, the task of spiritual life is not merely to ascend the Sephirot, drawing nearer to unity with the divine, but also to confront and rectify the brokenness embodied in the Qliphoth. This work of repair, or Tikkun, is both personal and cosmic. Through ethical action, prayer, and mystical intention, the practitioner seeks to liberate the captive sparks of holiness from the husks, restoring harmony to the universe and hastening redemption. Yet, this process is fraught with danger. The Qliphoth are not easily overcome. They are cunning, seductive, and ever eager to ensnare those who approach them unprepared. The Zohar and later mystical texts are filled with warnings about the perils of descending too deeply into the realms of impurity. The story is told of 4 sages who entered the paths, the orchard of mystical knowledge. One died, one went mad, one became a heretic, and only one, Rabbi Akiva, entered in peace and departed in peace. The message is clear. The pursuit of esoteric wisdom can heal or destroy, depending on the seeker's purity, humility, and preparation. The Qliphoth are not only cosmic realities but also psychological archetypes. In modern interpretations, they are seen as symbols of the shadow, the repressed, denied, and destructive aspects of the human psyche. To confront the Qliphoth is to face one's own inner darkness, to acknowledge the impulses and fears that lurk beneath the surface of consciousness. For some, this is an essential part of the spiritual path. Only by integrating the shadow can the soul achieve wholeness. For others, it is a dangerous flirtation with forces better left untouched. Practical Kabbalah, with its rites, incantations, and magical operations, is especially susceptible to the temptations of the Sitra Achra. The use of divine names, the summoning of angels or spirits, the crafting of amulets, all these acts, if performed without the proper intention and purity, can open gateways to the Qliphoth. The tradition is replete with tales of magicians who, seduced by the promise of power, fell prey to obsession, madness, or spiritual ruin. It is not only individuals who are at risk. The history of Messianic movements within Judaism, most notably the tragic saga of Shabtai Zevi in the 17th century, reveals how the collective pursuit of redemption can be hijacked by the dark side of mysticism. Zevi, a charismatic figure who proclaimed himself Messiah and was followed by thousands, ultimately converted to Islam under duress, plunging his followers into despair. Many later Kabbalists saw his story as a grim warning about the dangers of unbalanced yearning for the end of days, and the ever-present threat of the Sitra Achra usurping the work of holiness. The Qliphoth have also become a source of fascination in the Western occult tradition. In the 19th and 20th centuries, magicians and esotericists, most notably Aleister Crowley and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, developed elaborate systems for exploring the tunnels of Set, the shadow paths that wind through the Qliphothic realms. For some, this was a means of confronting and mastering the shadow. For others, it was a dangerous descent into spiritual chaos. Throughout the history of Kabbalah, the Sitra Achra and the Qliphoth have served as both a warning and a challenge. They remind the seeker that the path to the light is always shadowed by darkness, that the quest for knowledge is inseparable from the risk of temptation, and that the true work of the mystic is not to deny the existence of evil, but to transform it, to liberate the sparks of holiness from the husks and restore harmony to the world. Jewish magic and the Western occult tradition. The allure of Kabbalah's mysteries was never restricted to the boundaries of the Jewish world. From the Renaissance onwards, its reputation as a storehouse of ancient wisdom and supernatural power began to attract the attention of Christian scholars, Hermetic philosophers, and later, the architects of modern Western occultism. The transmission of Kabbalistic ideas, symbols, and magical techniques into the heart of the Western esoteric tradition marks one of the most fascinating and controversial developments in the history of mysticism. The first non-Jewish intellectuals to systematically engage with Kabbalah were the Christian humanists of the Italian Renaissance. Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, a brilliant polymath of the late 15th century, became convinced that the secrets of the Hebrew Kabbalah were not only compatible with Christianity but offered the key to understanding its deepest mysteries. In his famous 900 Theses, 1486, Pico argued that no science can better convince us of the divinity of Jesus Christ than magic and the Kabbalah. For Pico and his circle, Kabbalah was not heresy but a divine science, a prism through which the light of Christian revelation might be refracted and intensified. Pico's enthusiasm was shared by Johannes Reuchlin, a German humanist who authored several influential works on the Kabbalah, including De Arte Kabbalistica, 1517. Reuchlin went so far as to assert that the Hebrew names of God contained the hidden proof of the Trinity, and that the permutations of Hebrew letters could reveal Christian truths veiled within the Old Testament. This process, often called Christian Kabbalah, was controversial both within Judaism and among traditional Christians, many of whom viewed it with suspicion or outright hostility. The spread of Kabbalistic ideas into the Western magical tradition accelerated in the 16th and 17th centuries. Hermetic philosophers, alchemists, and astrologers found in Kabbalah a treasure trove of symbols, correspondences, and ritual techniques. The Tree of Life, with its 10 Sephirot and 22 connecting paths, became a central diagram for mapping not only the structure of the cosmos but the stages of spiritual ascent. Grimoires such as the Key of Solomon and the Book of Abramelin incorporated Kabbalistic formulae, angelic invocations, and magical names drawn from Jewish sources. The legend of the Knights Templar, a medieval order of warrior monks, provided fertile ground for the myth-making imagination of later centuries. According to some accounts, the Templars, during their time in Jerusalem, discovered secret manuscripts beneath the ruins of Solomon's Temple, manuscripts that contained the hidden wisdom of the Kabbalah. While there is no historical evidence for this claim, the story became a cornerstone of Masonic and occult lore. The Freemasons, in their rituals and symbolism, drew heavily on the imagery of the temple and, by extension, on the Kabbalistic tradition. The tracing boards, secret handshakes, and allegorical journeys of Masonry echo the ascent through the Sephirot and the quest for hidden knowledge. The transmission of Kabbalah into the Western occult was not without its distortions and misunderstandings. The sacred language and symbols of Jewish mysticism were often reinterpreted through a Christian or Hermetic lens, stripped of their original context and sometimes invested with meanings alien to their creators. Yet, the core idea, that the universe is structured by invisible laws, accessible through ritual, meditation, and the manipulation of symbols, remained intact. By the 19th century, Kabbalah had become a central pillar of the Western esoteric revival. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded in London in the late 1800s, built an elaborate system of magical training around the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. Each grade of initiation corresponded to a Sephirah, and students were instructed in the use of Hebrew names, angelic hierarchies, and the art of pathworking, guided visualization journeys along the paths of the tree. Figures such as S. L. MacGregor Mathers and William Wynne Westcott translated and adapted Kabbalistic texts, blending them with Hermetic and Rosicrucian teachings. Aleister Crowley, perhaps the most notorious occultist of the 20th century, made extensive use of Kabbalistic symbolism in his magical writings. In works such as 777 and the Book of Thoth, Crowley mapped the correspondences between the Sephirot, the Tarot, the planets, and the Hebrew alphabet, creating a comprehensive system of occult knowledge. Crowley's approach to the Qliphoth was especially provocative. He saw the exploration of the tunnels of Set, the shadowy paths beneath the Tree of Life, as a necessary ordeal for the aspiring adept. For Crowley and his followers, confronting the dark side of the psyche was not a danger to be avoided but a challenge to be embraced. Not all responses to the Kabbalah in the West were positive. Some Christian and secular critics saw its influence as a source of superstition, heresy, or even satanic corruption. Anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, particularly those linking Jews to secret societies and occult power, often invoked the Kabbalah as evidence of sinister designs. The same texts and symbols that inspired wonder and reverence in some quarters provoked fear and hatred in others. Despite these controversies, the impact of Kabbalah on the Western occult cannot be overstated. Its diagrams, formulae, and myths have become foundational elements in the worlds of ceremonial magic, tarot, astrology, and even depth psychology. The language of the Sephirot, the symbolism of the Golem, and the warnings of the Sitra Achra have found new life in literature, film, and popular culture. Kabbalah's journey from the secret study halls of Jewish mystics to the public rituals of Western magicians is a story of transformation and adaptation. It is a testament to the enduring power of symbols, the universality of the quest for hidden knowledge, and the complex interplay between light and shadow in the human spirit. Kabbalah and modern occultism. As the 20th and 21st centuries unfolded, Kabbalah's place in the world of Western esotericism both broadened and deepened. No longer confined to the secretive enclaves of Jewish mystics or the select circles of Renaissance magi, its symbols, themes, and practices became foundational for a bewildering array of occult, magical, and New Age movements. Within these contexts, the dual nature of Kabbalah, the interplay of light and darkness, wisdom and danger, was both embraced and, at times, sensationalized. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, with its meticulously structured grades and rituals, had already set a template for the adoption of Kabbalistic symbolism outside of Judaism. This system, in turn, was inherited and adapted by later groups such as the Builders of the Aditum, the Ordo Templi Orientis, and countless smaller magical orders. The Tree of Life became more than a diagram. It was a living map of the soul, a symbolic key to the mysteries of psychology, astrology, alchemy, and ritual magic. Practitioners used the Sephirot as stations of inner development, the Hebrew letters as gateways to altered states, and the paths as channels for visionary experience. Aleister Crowley, whose influence on modern occultism is hard to overstate, saw the Qliphoth not only as cosmic or psychological dangers but as necessary thresholds. In his view, the initiate's journey was incomplete without confronting, integrating, and ultimately transcending the shadows within. For Crowley and his followers, the left-hand path was not so much a descent into evil as a confrontation with the repressed and rejected aspects of the self. His magnum opus, Magic in Theory and Practice, incorporated Kabbalistic correspondences at every level, from the construction of ritual implements to the invocation of spirits. Outside these more formal magical systems, Kabbalah was also adopted, sometimes superficially, sometimes with genuine reverence, by the New Age movement. The late 20th century saw a proliferation of books, workshops, and self-help seminars promising access to the secrets of Kabbalah. Some teachers, such as those associated with the Kabbalah Center, presented a universalist version, stripped of its specifically Jewish context and ethical rigor. Critics, including many traditional Kabbalists, decried this as a dilution or distortion, warning that the dangers inherent in Kabbalah's dark side were being ignored or trivialized. Popular culture, too, has drawn heavily on Kabbalistic motifs. The Golem, once a symbol of mystical hubris and the perils of forbidden knowledge, became a recurring figure in novels, films, and graphic novels, from early German expressionist cinema to the superhero genre. The Tree of Life appears in everything from video games to tattoo art, its branching paths and enigmatic symbols evoking mystery, power, and spiritual promise. Yet, beneath the surface glamour, the old warnings persist. Experienced occultists and scholars alike remind aspirants that Kabbalah is not a mere system of correspondences or a toolkit for self-empowerment. Its teachings are rooted in a worldview where the forces unleashed by ritual and meditation are real, and their misuse can have grave consequences. The stories of magicians gone mad, of seekers lost in the labyrinth of the Qliphoth, are not simply metaphors for psychological distress but are taken, in many circles, as sober truths about the risks of spiritual practice. Psychologists such as Carl Jung recognized the archetypal power of Kabbalah's symbols, seeing in the Sephirot and the Qliphoth profound insights into the process of individuation, the integration of the conscious and unconscious self. Jung's fascination with alchemy and Kabbalah influenced a generation of analytical psychologists, who found in these ancient systems a language for describing the depths of the psyche. For Jung, the descent into the shadow was a necessary part of growth. The confrontation with the Qliphoth mirrored the hero's journey through the underworld. In academic and interfaith settings, there has been renewed interest in the ethical and philosophical dimensions of Kabbalah. Scholars such as Gershom Scholem, Moshe Idol, and Arthur Green have explored the tradition's ambivalent attitude towards magic, its warnings about pride, and its insistence on humility as the foundation of spiritual progress. For many, the lesson of Kabbalah's dark side is not to eschew power altogether, but to recognize the responsibilities it entails. Today, as seekers of all backgrounds explore the mystical arts in search of healing, transformation, and meaning, the dual legacy of Kabbalah remains as urgent as ever. Its symbols continue to inspire, its myths invite both awe and caution. Whether approached as a system of magic, a psychological map, or a path to divine union, Kabbalah's dark side reminds us that the pursuit of light inevitably casts a shadow, and that wisdom lies not in denial, but in understanding, respecting, and integrating the darkness that lies within and without. As we reflect on this journey, from the hidden chambers of medieval mystics to the digital forums of the modern age, we see that the ancient tension between aspiration and humility, power and responsibility, is as relevant now as it was in the days of the Zohar. The true initiate, as ever, must learn to walk the path where the sacred and the perilous are often intertwined. Conclusion. In tracing the shadowed history of Kabbalah, we have glimpsed a world where the boundaries between the holy and the forbidden are ever shifting. From the whispered incantations of medieval mystics to the clay-bound footsteps of the Golem, from the cryptic diagrams of the Zohar to the candlelit circles of Western occultists, the dark side of Kabbalah reminds us that the pursuit of hidden knowledge is both a blessing and a burden. Power, once sought, demands responsibility. Wisdom, once glimpsed, requires humility. A journey through the history and practice of Kabbalah reveals not simply a catalogue of magical techniques or supernatural legends, but a living tradition in which the quest for transcendence is never wholly separated from the risk of descent. The Sitra, Achra and the Qliphoth are not only realms of cosmic impurity or demonic force, they are also reminders of the human shadow, the ever-present temptation to misuse what is most sacred. The Golem, silent and powerful, is the mythic embodiment of this lesson, that the creative urge, when untethered from humility and reverence, can turn to destruction. The transmission of Kabbalah into Western esoteric circles, through Renaissance Magi, Christian Kabbalists, Freemasons, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley, and countless others, testifies to the universal appeal of its mysteries. Yet these adaptations have often stripped Kabbalah of its original ethical and spiritual context, reducing it to a system of correspondences or a tool for personal empowerment. The warnings of the tradition, about pride, about the dangers of forbidden knowledge, about the need for discipline and discernment, are as relevant to modern seekers as they were to the mystics of Saft or Prague. In the world of contemporary spirituality, where ancient wisdom is often repackaged and commodified, it is easy to forget that the path of ascent is always shadowed by the possibility of downfall. The stories of magicians lost to madness, of false messiahs and failed adepts, of communities torn by the misuse of mystical power, are not merely relics of a superstitious age. They are perennial reminders that the quest for light is inseparable from the confrontation with darkness. If the legends warn us of anything, it is that the ascent to inner light is never achieved by denying the existence of darkness, but by understanding and respecting it. The Golem's silent gaze, the echo of the Sitra Achra, and the secret names that tremble on the lips of magicians all urge us to seek wisdom with care, to balance our longing for transcendence with reverence for the mysteries that remain. In the end, the dark side of Kabbalah is not a doctrine to be rejected or a danger to be merely feared. It is an invitation to humility, to discernment, and to the courage required to walk the narrow path where the sacred and the perilous are often intertwined. It is a call to remember that every ascent is also a descent, every light casts a shadow, and the true work of the initiate is not to conquer darkness, but to transform it. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the dark side of Kabbalah. If you found this journey enlightening or thought-provoking, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. The path of wisdom is best walked together, and your support helps keep the light burning for all seekers who come after.